はい、皆さん、こんにちは。お時間になりましたので、イベント始めていきたいと思います。本日、司会進行を務めさせていただきます。千葉と申します。よろしくお願いします。はい、そしてですね、今回イベントナビゲートしていただく春日さんです。よろしくお願いします。
はい、XTC 日本幹事で、IT ファームの春日と申します。よろしくお願いいたします。
はい、お願いします。では、春日さん、早速なんですけども、今回1時間という短いイベントになりますので、早速お伺いしていきたいんですが、エクス
はい、
トリームテックチャレンジ XTC というものについて、ちょっとご紹介いただいてもいいでしょうか。画
はい、
面映しますね。
はい。
はい。
XTC というのは、グローバル課題、人類の大切な課題に取り組む起業家のための世界最大のスタートアップコンテストです。で、去年は、世界中から92カ国3700社以上のスタートアップが集まって、で、それで、グローバル決勝ラウンドに、たくさんの監修とともに、その世界一のチャンピオンを決定するという、SDGs を旗印にした、パーパスドリブンの、起業家のための、世界最大の、ピッチコンテストになっています。で、日本でも、日本 XTC 日本予選を開催しておりまして、で、今年の、3月9日に、日本中の、その、パーパスドリブンなスタートアップが集まって、日本予選を開催する予定です。今も、応募する、スタートアップの方、絶賛大募集しておりますので、ご興味、ご関心のある方は、検索で XTC Japan 2022というふうに検索いただくか、あるいは、この YouTube の概要欄をご覧いただいて、で、そこのリンクをクリックしていただければ、公式サイトに飛ぶことができますので、ぜひ、チェックしていただけると嬉しいです。
ありがとうございます。今回はそれに先駆けて、フラグシップというか、キーノートをご用意させていただいたというイベントなんですけれども、春日さん、今日のゲストのお二人について簡単にご紹介いただいてもいいでしょうか。
はい。本日一人目のゲストは、国連農業食糧機関 FAO の、事務局次長の、ベクトルさん。それからもう一人は、エクストリームテックチャレンジ XTC のグローバル事務局長を務めるビクトリア・スリフコフ。この二方に、来ていただいて、このスタートアップが切り開くフードテック、アグリテックの未来というテーマで対談をお送りさせていただきます。
はい、ありがとうございます。今回ですね、お二人になんと直接質問もしていただけるということですので、ぜひ皆さん、YouTube の概要欄、ごめんなさい、コメント欄ですね、に書いていただきましたら、私、千葉や春日の方でピックアップしていただき、お二人に聞いていきたいと思いますので、どしどしご質問いただければと思います。では、早速ですね、お二人のお話の方に入っていきたいと思うんですけれども、お二人、もちろん英語でスピーチということで、なかなか逐次通訳をしていますと時間もかかってしまうということで、翻訳の日本語を入れた、まず動画をご用意して、対談をご用意していますので、そちらご覧いただければと思います。少々お待ちください。どうでしょうか？映っていますでしょうか？はい。では、対談の方をお送りしてまいります。
So, hi, Victoria and Beth. Thank you today for being our guest for XTC Japan community. And we are very honored to have both of you here today. So, could you first start from introducing your organization, such as mission, scope, location, and also, whom you typically work with to achieve your goal? Starting from Beth.
Sure. Thank you very much, Shinya, for the opportunity to be here. It's always a pleasure to be with Victoria and our friends at XTC. So my name is Beth Bechtel. I'm Deputy Director General at FAO, which is the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. In case you don't know much about FAO, let me give a little bit of background. We have just recently celebrated our 75th anniversary, and over that time, we have taken on the role within the United Nations system to lead international efforts to defeat hunger and support the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. We have close to 200 member countries, member states who support not only our work, but in reverse, we support the development and the activation of agri-food systems transformation in their countries, especially those most in need of help to alleviate hunger, alleviate poverty, and to support small-scale farmers and their families. We support these programs in more than 130 countries worldwide. And today we are here very excited to talk about how innovation can be a contributing force, an accelerator to achieving these very important goals of eliminating hunger and working towards no poverty. I've spent a number of years in my past life working in both the private and the public sector in the United States. I grew up on a corn, soybean, and wheat farm in the Midwest of the US, and so I also clearly have a very strong sense of the importance that agricultural innovation and technology can bring to, again, these big global challenges. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to our conversation.
Thank you very much, Beth, for your great introduction. And Victoria, could you please introduce your side?
Hi, I'm Victoria Slivkoff. I am the Executive Managing Director of Extreme Tech Challenge, and it's an honor and pleasure to be here. It's wonderful to be here with our friend Beth Bechtel from United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization and our friends at IT Farm, our partner for the last few years, organizing Extreme Tech Challenge, the Japan regional competition. So the Extreme Tech Challenge is the world's largest startup competition and community for mission-driven, purpose-driven startups. Our mission is really to empower entrepreneurs building innovative technologies that are in the world. And the goal is to identify and find these great companies from all across the world that are, can be market leading as well as are impactful, and then give them what we call the rocket fuel to help scale their success. And those are four things: global visibility. Second is access to investment capital. Third is access to corporate strategic partnerships. And fourth is mentorship. So as I mentioned, now this past year, we received over 3,700 applications from nearly 100 countries. And we've been scaling and growing through our partner network of over 70 VCs, corporations, policymakers, academia, philanthropists, as well as ecosystem builders. So it's wonderful to be here. Think about Extreme Tech Challenge as this wonderful platform that facilitates cross-pollination between the public-private sector. And that's why we've been so thrilled to formalize our partnership with the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization earlier this year.
Thank you very much, both Beth and Victoria, for the exciting introduction. So today's discussion is about solving or addressing the food and agricultural challenges with technology. And some people may misunderstand that food and agricultural challenges are only about those hungry people in the deserts. However, of course, that is one of the very important aspects and goals, the challenges. But I believe that the world's food and agricultural challenges are far more diverse than we imagine. So, Beth, could you give us, some insights about what are the, current top challenges of food and agriculture in the world, and what are the emerging crises that all human, including the development countries in Japan, like Japan, may face in the short term and in midterm?
I think you've captured the environment that we find ourselves in very, very well. We have a tremendous number of global challenges to which food and agriculture can sometimes be viewed as a contributing force. But I think more than anything, we all collectively recognize that food and agriculture needs to be a part of the solution building that comes in addressing a number of these hot topics or emerging trends and crises that we do see at the global level. And I think it's really important to recognize that the fact that all of us that are here today, including this partnership with Xtc, really demonstrates that there is, I think, a growing recognition of the importance of working together on a number of these global problems, and that the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals is really a priority in ensuring that we have a sustainable future for everyone. We are, as you know, we're working towards what's called the 2030 Agenda of the United Nations. And as we sit here now, almost on the cusp of, or in the early stages, we're here at the early days of 2022, we now realize we have, as we say in food and agriculture, really only 8 seasons left to reach these goals. And the issues that we are now facing related to the overlap of the COVID-19 pandemic has made all of this even more challenging. So as we sort of step back and see where we are today, it's really very staggering to think that in this current year, we still have more than 800 million people in the world, over 10% of the world's population, who are facing hunger. And many of those, approaching 3 billion people, don't have access to safe, nutritious, and sufficient supplies of food. And I think more and more, while we get accustomed to these data points, these statistics, I think we all have to come together and really assert that this is no longer acceptable. And we can and we must do better. And the challenges only continue to grow as we think that by the year 2050, we will see the world's population growing to something closer to 10 billion. We also know that it's important to really sort of think, though, beyond issues of food insecurity and hunger. There are a number of other critical global challenges that innovation and technology and new ways of working and partnering are going to have to contribute to as well. How do we feed this growing population while we also eliminate the impact on the environment and we focus on the emerging climate crisis? We have to make sure that we maintain biodiversity. We have to make sure that we protect our soils, water, and air supplies. We have to make sure that we can find solutions that help us adapt to this changing climate and also be in a position where we can mitigate the problems that it is increasingly bringing to places all over the world. We have to find ways to sustainably fight a growing number of plant and other transboundary animal pests, diseases that continue to come in plagues and other forms. And we have to make sure that we avoid negative consequences of tools and products and systems that might come along as solutions to that. We have to make food more nutritious, more affordable, more accessible. And we also need to make sure that we reduce the astounding amount of food that is either lost prior to consumption or in fact wasted. In fact, about 1/3 of all food that is produced in the world is wasted. And these are clear opportunities where, again, innovation, creativity, new ways of thinking to bring smart ideas to these types of challenges are going to be increasingly important. And we know that these are critical issues for even the nation of Japan. There are a lot of really important contributions as we move into the Nutrition for Growth Summit that's hosted in Japan, efforts around food loss and waste, and also I think the commitment that is coming from Japan around the climate crisis are all really important places where these types of partnerships and finding ways that Japan-based entrepreneurs and tech startups and companies can contribute will be really important going forward.
Thank you very much. I can, see that, the food and agricultural challenges spans across, wide range of, areas in the world, and including many aspects such as stability, equality, efficiency, and, sustainability. In order to address, those challenges, of course, there are many approaches to, tackle those issues. On the technology side, what kind of expectation do you have on the technology, to solve, those challenges? And in other words, how can technology contribute, to those emerging challenges of food and agricultural areas?
So we realize, and I think as I've said before, while FAO and the United Nations and so many of our other partners and stakeholders are working, I think, on a number of these topics, we know that no one of us can do it alone. And the scope of all of these challenges that we've talked about here today really means that the approach must be one where we come together, an all hands on deck approach, as you might say. One of the ways that we have begun to, I think, explore new ways of working is through basically a new commitment here at FAO to the importance of private sector partners. And that's something that has really been an evolution here in FAO. I think as many organizations have really begun to see, I think, private sector businesses and entities really step up in their commitments to sustainability, their commitments to solving the Sustainable Development Goal challenges. And obviously here with Xtc present, this commitment to technology for good is something that I think is really important. And so for us, that includes, again, startups and entrepreneurs like all of you who are here with us today, where we realize we need creativity, we need agility, we need nimbleness, we need ingenuity that's going to drive this kind of innovation that could come in order to achieve the goal of ending hunger and food insecurity and all of these other challenges. Technology and innovation is something that can absolutely play a critical role in addressing, I think, a number of these areas. And I think there are, again, through today's conversation, going to be some really great opportunities to see what kinds of applications can be brought to bear. But some initial ideas that sort of come to mind as I think about some of the topics and the challenges we discussed. One particularly strong area is in the area of data, digital agriculture, digital applications, digital services to farmers. How do we continue to build the right applications and the right platforms where farmers can be much more efficient, more accurate in tracking plant pests, for example, tracking the insects and the other kinds of plant diseases that can oftentimes infest a crop and really ultimately, when one crop is lost, potentially destroy a livelihood. And so ensuring that we have these kinds of digital tools to help us stay ahead, to help us analyze, to help us make better decisions is certainly one area that I think we can really find more creative solutions. I think there's a really important role for artificial intelligence, for machine learning. These are going to be ways in which we bring together these types of technologies to optimize production techniques, to really analyze and assess and understand changing climate and weather patterns, better matching sellers and markets to ultimately perhaps reduce food waste. In fact, the winner of Xtc's global competition this year in the ag tech, food and water category was a company named Wasteless, who's offering something along these lines by really looking at how we more dynamically price food as it gets closer to expiration to both ultimately reduce food waste and increase sales. One last point that I would make is maybe a bit more on the biological side. I think there's huge opportunity for new types of scientific discoveries and new types of products that bring more bio-based solutions, bio-based advancements, so that we can, again, better protect plants, better focus on animals, and again, all while making sure that we minimize the impact that we are having with many traditional products and systems on the climate and on our natural resources. So the list, I think, is really quite endless. And I think with what's really important to emphasize here in this conversation is that this really needs to involve the innovation that comes from across a number of sectors. This is a time where agricultural technology, logistics technologies, data technologies, finance, clean tech, environmental-based technologies, all can be brought to bear to, I think, contribute to finding the solutions to these big challenges.
Thank you very much. So Beth mentioned, gave us, great perspective that, the food and agricultural challenges, can be addressed with technologies, not only with those, food techs or ag techs in the narrow scope, but also a very wide range of technologies can contribute, to these areas. And Victoria, could you tell us what kind of areas in the XTC, are, people are focusing, like entrepreneurs, investors are focusing in the recent XTC, and which area of them could be potentially related or can contribute to what Beth mentioned?
Yeah, so I want to start by three themes I like to highlight related to the challenges, and then tie that to the wonderful, outstanding, innovative startup companies that we've seen in the Extreme Tech Challenge ecosystem. So first, as Beth mentioned, food production is not sustainable. Currently, we have 50% of food production is at risk due to climate change. 20% of agricultural land is classified as degraded, even though its maintenance consumes 30% of the energy we produce and accounts for 22% of the total greenhouse emissions. Second, food is poorly distributed, as we've seen how the pandemic has really highlighted the insufficiencies in our supply chain systems on a global scale. Each year, we waste a third of the food we produce, often before it reaches our tables. And actually, the bulk of the loss is in retail stores. And one of the companies, as Beth mentioned, called Wasteless this year, that won our AgTech category, is that the data analytics, the AI-driven technology that allows retailers to mark down foods before as it gets closer to the expiration date. So really reducing the big opportunities to curb the waste issue. And also 26% of the world's population is suffering from obesity or excessive weight. So there's a lot of good food, but are these good food getting to the people that are in most need? While a bulk of the developing countries are still suffering from the issue of hunger. And then on top of that, due to our growing population, experts expect a 70% increase in food demand by 2050. And then the last point I want to mention is consumer demands have changed over the recent years. If you've seen companies like Beyond Meats have gone mainstream, there's an increased focus by consumers on sustainability, healthy and freshness of how we want to feed our bodies is really forcing the food industry to innovate and thinking about alternative ways that we can deliver the sustenance in a climate-friendly environment. And this was all before the global pandemic and health crisis hit. But now really further energize and heighten the vulnerabilities in the agriculture and food industry, exposing the need for a more sustainable and efficient supply chain. And all this is wrapped up by the inequalities that we've seen, especially highlighted by the pandemic, that climate tech and food security issues are disproportionately impacting disadvantaged communities. So I want to highlight a couple of companies from this past year that really ties into that theme. There's a company called Post Harvest that uses agriculture technology focusing on sustainable food production and practices. There was a company called Takachar that came out of the National Laboratory in the US that has a special patented small-scale decentralized processing and upgrading of crop and forest residues and turn them into commercialized products. A company that we found in Singapore called Sophie's Bionutrients, and they're using alternative they use microalgae base to create animal-like protein, starting with fish. So those are some of the exciting things that comes out of our ecosystem. And again, this past year, we attracted 3,700 applications. So this is just a very small slice and very small example of what this ecosystem, the innovations from the community that can be offered to address issues.
Thank you very much. And this year, there was a great announcement between FAO and Xtc that both organizations decided to collaborate, to make a match between the world's food and agricultural challenges and the technological startup seeds. So what is the goal and expectation to this partnership, and actually how did this partnership happen? Maybe I believe both of you would be able to answer this, but
Beth has a little more history here, so
yeah.
Beth is going to kick it off,
Yeah,
and I'm gonna supplement.
Sure. So our relationship with Xtc began, I think, in 2020, so still relatively new in terms of this collaboration. And I was invited very kindly to serve as a judge for the global competition's food, ag tech, and water category. And I repeated that role in this year when we announced this partnership. And I think the opportunity for us that we saw, which was coming with Xtc, really is, as I've said earlier, it's a recognition of this opportunity to better pool and better leverage our knowledge, our ideas, our resources, our networks. And I think by complementing these strengths that each of our different organizations bring, this is how we are going to continue to be able to, I think, bring a number of very smart, very committed, and very passionate people with really big ideas and potentially, I think, maybe even some big investments, we hope, to these challenges that are being faced here as the global community. So we were able to announce this partnership at a recently held new event, new initiative, led by FAO called the World Food Forum. The World Food Forum is an independent global network of partners and was really created and spurred on by our youth committee here at FAO. It's entirely led by youth, and it's an ambition to spark a movement to transform our global agri-food systems and to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals of, obviously, zero hunger, very much at the core. And so the World Food Forum Startup Innovation Awards, which were and are powered by Xtc, was really the culmination, I think, culmination and I think also starting point for more exciting things to come, where we were able to bring Xtc and their approach to challenges and to bring young people and their contributions to very much these big challenges. These were really important to us. We have 4 categories of what we call aspirations here in FAO: better production, better nutrition, better environment, and a better life. And this is how we organize much of our programmatic work to demonstrate how we contribute to these larger topics. And it was terrific to be able to use those 4 betters as categories, in a sense, for all of these really great entrepreneurs to bring their ideas forward. So I'll stop there and turn it over to Victoria to fill in, I think, some more about the challenge itself, and I think some of the exciting things we see as potential opportunities for even further collaboration going forward.
So I think it's no surprise that we have so many big problems to solve, and it really requires the elevated awareness, global cooperation, innovation, and leadership to drive actions forward. So this partnership really came together formally this past summer and is really anchored on our mutual interest to empower tech entrepreneurs that are driving transformative innovations and improving nutrition and food security worldwide to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals, particularly zero hunger. So bringing back to the genesis of Xtc, as we were launched to address the UN Sustainable Goals, we were just so thrilled about our formal partnership to join hands in tackling this important challenge faced as a global community. And what we think this partnership provides is the opportunity to highlight exceptional companies. This year we highlighted Extreme Tech Challenge companies, but we really want to dig into the FAO ecosystem and elevate the startups and entrepreneurs, particularly the innovative youth, and bring their innovations to the global stage and really connect them to opportunities to corporate executives such as yourself, venture capitalists, and other people and mentors and stakeholders that are really interested in helping to take these innovations to scale. So we were really excited, as Beth mentioned, our first collaboration was the World Food Forum Startup Innovation Challenge. And this year we highlighted top companies from Xtc 2020 and 2021, ag tech and food tech cohort, brought them on the global stage. We had a pitch competition that was held half in person, and it was a hybrid event virtually. I was in Rome hosting it with Beth, where we had pitch events. We also had masterclass discussions and some really good tidbits from domain experts that really highlighted companies to learn about their innovations, and then ultimately awarded the 4 winners of each competition track, and then there was an overall winner announced. So this is just the beginning of the partnership, and really thinking about how to bring our resources together, and really what are the key elements and key processes that can really unlock public-private partnerships. And I know that FAO recently onboarded a new chief innovation officer, so there was a lot of exciting strategy and planning, behind the scenes, and thinking about how to further energize our network.
Thank you very much. So for the people who don't know, yes, the World Food Forum, was carried out in this October online and also in person as a hybrid style. And there was a kind of pitch startup competition award called Startup Innovation Award in the World Food Forum event. So Victoria or Beth, could you please highlight some examples of the startups that participated in the Innovation Award, and what kind of challenges they addressed, what kind of solution they proposed?
Yeah, so I want to highlight the winners first. The 4 winners are for better production. It's a company called Wasteless out of Israel. As we talked about earlier, they deliver an AI-driven markdown optimization solution for fresh foods in supermarkets and allowing retailers to automatically reduce prices on products based on expiration dates or food waste risk. And second category, better nutrition. The winner was Pebble Labs out of the US, out of New Mexico. And the company uses a directed biotics as their delivery vehicle for RNA and other bioactives to harness a plant or animal's natural processes to repel pests or activate disease protection processes. So really thinking about moving away from chemical pesticides into something that's more sustainable. For the better environment category, it was Bondi Bio from Australia. And that particular startup leverages solar technology and water to sequester and valorize CO2 to solar biomanufacture high-value plant-derived natural products that's using in cosmetics and industrial applications. And for the last category, Better Life, the winner was a company called Hill Ridge Technology from Australia, and coincidentally it was also the Xtc 2021 co-winner for that particular year. And it's a fintech company that offers a platform that enables novel parametric insurance for weather events for the agriculture industry. So really thinking about how to protect the smallholder farmers from these unpredictable natural disasters and to protect their livelihood. And they recently had a couple of really great partnerships and financial backings from big insurance companies. So those are the 4 winners. And and the overall, I think people walked away. I think it's just really impressed by the breadth and depth of innovation that comes for our ecosystem. I'll give a little love to FarmSense. This is another company from California that has a special technology to detect different sort of insects in the field, so that you can be precise, right? Precision agriculture is using the right type of pesticides to fight any particular waste. And we had a company out of Food Locker out of Kenya. So you got to give some love to our entrepreneurs down in Africa, and it essentially creates a marketplace among their community to move fresh food, so that you are really optimizing that supply chain ecosystem to get the right kind of foods to the right kind of people. So I think what this event really taught us is innovation truly happens everywhere and anywhere, and it's really beyond borders and cultures, and it really excites me to be involved with Extreme Tech Challenge, is because we do have this incredible vast global ecosystem and community that finds these great companies through partners like yourselves, Shinya from IT Farm.
And can I just add, it was also just an incredibly intentional and very deliberate process that we went through as we navigated the reviews of all of the different pitches and all of the different entrepreneurs in the contest. But it was also really difficult because, as I think Victoria had said earlier, I think we had something approaching 3,700 sort of entrants to start as kind of the full, sort of grouping of entrepreneurs and companies to consider. That got shortlisted to 65 or 66 in these 4 better categories. Then we do more homework and more due diligence and more conversations, and you get to 12. And then from the 12, you get to either these 4 or these, this one ultimately is the overall sort of winner or innovator. And for, I know my colleagues and my peers who also participated in the judging, I mean, first of all, it's just such an impressive group of individuals and their teams who they're bringing together so many, I think, important backgrounds and important experiences, that it's really, again, a moment where you I think sometimes have to find optimism in this time that we find ourselves in. It can get quite depressing when you really do sort of run through that tracking list of all of these challenges that we're all facing. When you have an opportunity to be part of a process like this, it really does give you great encouragement and maybe even quite a bit of hope that we have some really outstanding options, solutions, and new ideas that are there. And this is where, again, it's going to take all of us to make sure we bring that support and that awareness and that advocacy so that they can be successful.
I think it also highlights how much more work there is to do in our respective positions, because here are these really awesome technologies that's being deployed in the US or Europe or Israel, but can they be applied in sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia and in different parts of the world to make the same impact? So really thinking about arbitraging and bringing technologies from one part of the world to application in a different part of the world. And that takes a lot of coordination. It really takes global partnerships and connecting those dots.
Thank you very much. So it sounds like there are many, a lot of, exciting technology, coming out, from the collaboration in the World Food Forum. And how do you see, the potential, actual potential of those startups to change, actually may give the impact to the challenges of this world? And also at the same time, we have to be honest to the reality that there must be a lot of challenges or the steps that those startups may have to take in order to fully make those kind of impacts happen in the real world, in the global scale. So how do you also see those challenges, and what kind of supports would be desired, from like private sectors or public sectors to actually make those changes happen with those startups?
So for us here at FAO, as I mentioned when I introduced a bit more about our agency, about our organization, I mentioned our country office network, having representation in 130 countries around the world. And as we all know, that representation for us are in the countries that are suffering the most, the countries where, the challenges that we have talked about a bit here in our conversation are most pressing and need the most attention. And so in some ways, what we want to be able to, I think, do more of is serve in what is really a natural role for FAO as the convener and the facilitator and the matchmaker. We need to make sure that we open up our global network, our regional networks, and our country level networks to get ministries of agriculture, ministries of finance, parliamentarians, academics, civil society organizations, MSMEs, private sector businesses, whether they are, again, global multinationals or they are, again, located there at the country level, investors, development banks. I mean, this is our community as FAO. This is our set of stakeholders and constituents. And so for us, while it may not be a sort of dedicated undertaking that FAO really builds significant long-term programmatic areas of work around sort of entrepreneurial tech startup opportunities, we need to be the connector first and foremost. And we also need to be the advocate. We need to be the group that builds awareness, that continues to encourage this kind of activity, and having a partnership like this with Xtc at this, sort of space and time that we find ourselves in, FAO sort of recommitting to, innovation, committing to science and technology as key drivers of these more sustainable agricultural production systems, this commitment to more engagement with the private sector, to bring them in as viable partners, not being as concerned perhaps about, avoiding all the risks that may or may not come to us as a multilateral organization. We're trying to balance all of those things at the moment. And so admittedly, to be very candid, this is a bit of new space for an organization like FAO, but the time is right. The commitment is here, and I think we have such great momentum from the World Food Forum, but not just an event like that. We have even greater momentum from so many of these global convenings that have been taking place. We're fresh off the UN Food Systems Summit that was held, unfortunately, virtually in New York. We're fresh off of the COP26 in Glasgow. We've got Nutrition for Growth in Tokyo and many others that are coming, and each and every one of those gatherings and convenings is yet again another opportunity for us to build this type of awareness, to bring more and different voices and constituencies and people outside of food and agriculture to the needs and to the opportunities that I think are being presented. So we intend to really continue to use our voices, to use our relationships, and to use our, I think, strong programmatic work as well to be, I think, an amplifier in a way to the opportunities that we see in tech startups and in this whole space of new and different ways of finding innovation tools and systems to address these big global issues.
I think also, longer investment on our side is connecting our global mentor network to inspire these innovative youth, as we saw from the World Food Forum, to really connect them to opportunities through the investor network, corporate executive network, so that they can bring some light and some attention to the innovations that they're developing, whether this is in Indonesia or Nigeria, or in Europe. So I think it's tapping into our global networks. So ultimately, it's about who you know and what kind of knowledge you can extract from this community, and really be that connective tissue to the private sector that brings the the venture capitalists are always on the lookout for wonderful innovations that are both impactful as well as commercially viable, and also corporate executives. You know, we've seen corporate venture capital exploding over the last decade, and you know, all these great large companies are taking the open innovation model to find ways to grow. So I think it's really, yes, focusing on Extreme Tech Challenge companies, encouraging all the startups in the FAO portfolio to apply to XTC and get them plugged into the community and all the resources that we provide.
Thank you very much. And you know, I'm literally excited with what Beth said. Time is right. Commitment is here, and it sounds like there are huge opportunities through this collaboration network for both entrepreneurs and for the food and agricultural industries. So I would like to ask both of you to encourage the entrepreneurs and the engineers or startups in Japan. How can Japan contribute to this area, and especially, is there anything that you expect with entrepreneurs in Japan to give their based on their expertise or environment, social environment or backgrounds?
Victoria, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think Japan has a wonderful history of having some really innovative technologies, right? Really early in electronics and really early in developing, investing in R&D. So I think that is a strength that continues to amplify. I've seen really interesting, AI-driven companies, data focusing on companies out of Japan. So I think looking at bringing more of the tech, the AIs, the data economy, the cloud computing expertise into solving these ag tech and food tech issues. And I also think that Japan, there's a lot of urban centers. So thinking about new technologies like urban farming, how do you extract more productivity out of your farming lands or available farming lands? And how do you really bring urban farming to be a model that can be replicated? I think these are some of the really interesting and perhaps unique positions that Japanese entrepreneurs have.
I would completely agree. I think there are just so many outstanding models of innovation that have come from Japan, from entrepreneurs at all different stages in the innovation cycle. And to Victoria's exact point, much of the innovation has come from these other industries, economies, or sectors that I think today more than ever, as we've said earlier in our conversation, have now really great applicability to food and agricultural based challenges. So whether that's consumer electronics, as she mentioned, even in the automotive industry, as we think about, improvements to how we protect the climate, and we think about, reduction of so many of the pollutants and other things that have come as we've put different innovations and technologies together without perhaps understanding longer term what their impacts are. I think this commitment by Japanese entrepreneurs to, I think, always sort of in some ways be ahead of the curve really portends to be, I think, a great opportunity for us. Especially, I think, from an FAO perspective, again, as we are really trying to get, I think, more engagements with private sector actors, this would be a place where I would say I hope that we could begin to build some new relationships with Japanese companies, with Japanese partners, because what we need to be able to do is really sort of transfer that knowledge, that ingenuity, and that creativity to these other parts of the world, as Victoria has mentioned, where, we really need to be thinking about Southeast Asia, about Africa, about South and Central America, and our ability to sort of connect and I think take some of the either existing technologies or even the future ideas of innovation to those places thinking about context, thinking about adaptability, thinking about affordability are going to be key. And so if there are ideas, if there are, sort of commitments and plans that a number of startups and entrepreneurs in Japan have around those types of opportunities, those are the kinds of conversations and areas of exploration that we'd like to take up.
Thank you very much. So these messages can give, great encouragements to a wide range of, Japanese entrepreneurs in diverse, areas of technologies. So let's take, some questions from the audiences and, see some interactive discussions here. Thank you very much.
はい、ありがとうございます。皆さんに、今回、ベースさんとビクトリアさんのビデオ対談を見ていただきましたが、ここからはですね、実際にお二人に登壇していただきまして、皆さんの質問に答えていければと思っております。ビクトリアさん、ベースさん、よろしくお願いいたします。
Beth Victoria, could you please turn on your video and microphone then?
Hi.
Hi, great.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, great to see you all. Great to see you, Beth.
Same here.
Thank you. So yeah, let me handle the interpretation, the translation between English and Japanese, so that you guys can have full interactive discussion with the local audiences. 私の方で英語と日本語の逐次通訳をさせていただきますので、会場の方からいただいたご質問をぜひこの後、お二人の方に投げかけていきたいと思います。
はい。では、まず YouTube の方でいただいた質問から、私の方で代読させていただきます。順番前後してしまって申し訳ありません。まず、データ分析で生産や分配ができるようになった場合に、どれぐらい代替肉などにより効率的な食品に移行することが望ましいと思われますでしょうかという質問をいただいています。
はい。Yeah, the first question from the YouTube audience is that, once the more efficient and, equal distribution and, balancing of or production is achieved, through the data analytics and optimization, then what could be the priority between, those existing, farming optimization and the alternative, foods such as alternative meats or some other efficient, nutritions?
So maybe I'll jump in and hope that I interpret the question correctly. But I think the point of the question raises a really important trend that we're seeing in food and food systems, which is a number of new approaches to production, to food processing, food production itself. And much of this we know is also being driven by consumer tastes and preferences, consumer demands. And so I think what we're going to be evolving to is not really a one-size-fits-all type of production, but rather a variety of production practices, production systems, where you may still have traditional livestock production, as an example, that's much more optimized, that's much more managed by data and digital systems, that takes into account the climate-based challenges from traditional livestock production, but at the same time have the innovation that's coming from the alternative protein space, again, very much driven by concerns about both consumer reactions, nutrition issues, environmental concerns. So I think what we're going to be navigating over the course of the next, decade or more is kind of finding a balance between these traditional practices, more sustainable practices, new and innovative practices, some of which may stay and some of which may fail. But I think this is the part of finding, very excitingly, these new opportunities inside global food systems that give us a lot of opportunity for innovation.
So do you believe that if those great optimization is achieved, then those alternative, foods and nutrition, still should remain as the option, future option, or, we should, prefer to stick to the traditional, kind of farming or nutrition?
Well, I really think that is looking at the sustainable food system as a holistic problem and solution we're solving. So in addition to optimizing supply chain issues, looking at alternative proteins, agri and aqua technologies to come up with new materials, and also looking at safety, looking at sustainability and security issues. As Beth mentioned, we're looking at data analytics and machine learning and cloud computing solutions to advance our path to solution, and also looking at circular economy, sustainable packaging, looking at biotransformation, other different aspects. So I think it's really not just looking at all these solutions in silo, but thinking holistically at solving the problem.
Thank you very much. Yeah, let me translate. まずベスからの回答は。ご回答は、新しいアプローチ、例えばその食料生産のプロセスであったり、消費者の趣向や好みであったり、様々なその新しいアプローチが影響するところっていうのはあると思うんですけれども、そういったものと、あるいはその生産の慣習であったりだとか、既存の生産システムであったりだとか、そういったところのその改善というのは、その両方の選択肢っていうのが伏線的に進められるべきだと思っています。で、それはどちらか片方だけに全振りするっていうわけではなくて、それは例えば片方が失敗するっていう可能性も当然ありますし、それ以上に作る側のその事情だけでなくて、それはその消費者の好みであったり受け入れであったりっていうところにも影響されてくることなので、その意味でも両方の選択肢っていうのを引き続き行っていくっていうことが重要だというふうに、まずベクトルさんからの回答です。それからビクトリアさんの方はシステム全体として見たときに、もちろん代替食料っていう一つの側面はあるんですけれども、その代替食料のメリットっていう一つの側面はあるんですけれども、そこに例えばサプライチェーンであったり、新素材であったりだとか、データ分析、循環社会っていったような様々なシステムとしての構成要素っていうのがあって、それを相対的に伸ばしていくっていうことを考えると、やはりどちらの選択肢っていうのもそのシステム全体に対して貢献していくものなので、効率的な生産や分配ができるようになった場合でも、それぞれの技術っていうのを伸ばしていくことでシステム全体として発展を遂げられるっていうのが答えでした。
ありがとうございます。では2つ目に参りたいと思います。先ほど最後に日本の起業家にメッセージもありましたが、農薬の原料は生産国から限られており、食料安全保障に大きな影響を持っていると思います。また日本は農薬の使いすぎでこのテーマにおいて課題先進国だと思います。これについてはどうお考えですか？ですとか、農業関連分野、特に期待すること、日本に期待することなどありますかという質問をいただいておりますのでお願いします。
The second question is about the food security as well as the pesticide overuse. And regarding the food security, those agricultural products and also agricultural materials, intermediate materials are only produced in limited areas, regions, and countries, and that may cause the challenges in the food security. And also at the same time, Japan is also known as a heavy user of pesticides. And in this area, we mean the audience believes that Japan is one of the most advanced, challenged countries in this issue. So what do you have any thoughts or advices to this situation?
Yeah, let me take maybe a first pass at that question. This area of crop protection and pesticide use is something that FAO works on extensively, given our technical expertise and approach to making sure that there are responsible approaches to agricultural production around the world. And I'm not sure that Japan should single itself out as perhaps perhaps the most challenged nation. Coming from a farm myself in the Midwest of the United States, I can really attest to this just very traditional dependence and reliance on pesticide and other types of input products. I think what we're seeing now, even from the private sector companies that are part of this crop input space, is a real commitment to start to change the approaches to the development of different types of future pesticides and tools. We're seeing tremendous amount of research and development, and Victoria can maybe even talk about some of the entrepreneurs and the startups that are emerging in this space, but really focusing more on bio-based production systems and approaches, much more natural, less synthetic, not so dependent on traditional chemistry and production systems. But for us, we really work hard with the private sector, also with national governments, to ensure that we begin to limit globally the amount and the use of what we call highly hazardous pesticides. So really ensuring that we eliminate worldwide the use of some number of these. We also work in countries to ensure that we can eliminate the obsolete stocks, that we work better on packaging of pesticides and the containers, how the containers are cleaned, how they're saved, all to make sure that we do a better job of ensuring that we protect human health, that we protect the natural resources. And I think that we begin to better transition to, as I said, more of these sustainable or green innovation practices. And I do think that this is an area where maybe even for the first time, the private sector themselves and the companies that are involved in this particular space are willing to make change and are willing to find new solutions and new tools, given the challenge that the pesticide reliance and dependence has created.
Thank you very much. FAO でも今食料セキュリティとそれから農薬対策というのには非常に積極的に取り組んでいて、でベス自身もアメリカの中西部の農家の出身で、非常にこの農薬の問題も実地で経験しているんですけれども、やっぱりこの農薬だったり食料セキュリティの分野を大きく改善していくために民間部門の巻き込みを含めたアプローチの大きな改革が必要なタイミングに来ていて、でそれは例えば農薬のことで言えばそのバイオ技術に基づいたその食料生産の有機生産の加速であるとか、強毒性の殺虫剤を廃止していくであること、それからあと食料セキュリティとも関連してくる部分だと思うんですけれども、食料の保管ですね。保管の技術の改善で、そこに汚染が入らないようにするであるとか、あるいはその害虫が入らないようにするであるとか、そういったような技術的な民間部門の参加によって、この分野というのを大きく今改革していけるタイミングというのに来ているというのがベスの認識です。で、特にその今までの歴史を見ても民間部門がこの領域に取り組みを始めてくれたっていうのは本当に歴史の中でも初めてのことでもあるので、ぜひそういったその民間部門との連携を通じてそういったところにより改善というか改革の取り組みをしていきたいという回答でした。
ありがとうございます。ちょっとお時間は過ぎているんですけれども、この Zoom の中にはですね、Extreme Tech Challenge の日本予選 Xtc Japan のスポンサードの皆さんですとか、あとは日本でですね、フード、アグリテックをされているスタートアップの CEO もお招きしているので、少しインタビューといいますか、ご質問を受けていきたいと思います。はい。まずご質問いただいているので、ナターシャさん、顔とマイク出せますでしょうか。はい。
Hello, everyone. I personally often find it a bit difficult to find a balance between, for startups, between making money and solving social and environmental problems. More often than not, investors simply don't want to deal with social entrepreneurs because there's no money in it. So I guess my question is, do you have any advice for social entrepreneurs who, for example, want to develop urban composting solution or tackle plastic-free packaging solutions to attract investors to make something initial that is good enough to bring to a global competition like XTC, for example?
Well,
let me translate first.
Okay, yeah.
今のナターシャさんからのご質問というのは、社会的インパクト、その企業において社会的インパクトと、それからいわゆる利益を出していくことというのの、そのバランスの取り方というか、どういうふうにそれぞれを位置づけていけばいいのかというところに対するお悩みで、社会的インパクトを前面に押し出すと、その投資家の方々が、儲からない事業なのねっていうふうな印象を持たれて、なかなか出資に結びつかないケースもあると。そういったような、例えば、こういった分野でも、都市での、コンポスティング、いわゆる堆肥化ですね、であったりだとか、あるいはそのパッケージング、その包装の技術などでも様々な目新しいスタートアップというのが出てきているんですけれども、そういったようなスタートアップっていうのを盛り立てていくために、どういったようなことができるんでしょうかという、そういうアドバイスの質問です。Victoria, please.
Thanks for your question. I think there is no better time to be an impact entrepreneur because now we've seen is that the impact aspect and also profitability are coming together. So if you are a company that's developing a solution addressing these sustainable development challenges, and you can prove that the technology is scalable, you will attract investor interest. So as an example of looking at Beyond Meat, right, a company that was originally focused on a specific niche demographic, but because we have this wide adoption of the general public with the interest of, consuming food that's more sustainable, right? They're really aligning their purchasing pattern with their value. So I think if you're a company that can show that you have an innovative technology, but also can prove that you can have market traction, whether it's a better technology or it's more cost competitive, then you're definitely venture backable, and you have to be solving a large problem with an innovative solution.
企業には今そういった社会的インパクトのある企業にはベストなタイミングです。で、それはなぜかというと、その社会的なインパクトと、それから事業としての利益というのが、今まではそれがバラバラだったこともあるんですけれども、今それが一致する時代に来ていて、で、例えば、有名なビヨンドミート、代替肉の、スタートアップですね。これも最初は、非常にニッチな領域で、狭い、お客様に対して提供していたものが、それが一般の皆様にも受け入れられるようになって、非常に大きなビジネスになったと。で、こういうその革新的技術や、それに基づく、市場のトラクション、それからコスト優位性、というのをなどを投資家に対して示していくことで、その大きな課題を革新的な技術、そしてアプローチによって、解いている、解決しているということを示すことが、投資家からも出資を受けたりであるとか、あるいはその事業を伸ばしていくということに関して、非常に有効な時代になっているという回答です。
Thank you.
ありがとうございます。ではですね、日本で、ごめんなさい、アグリテックのですね、シェアグリというスタートアップを経営している CEO の井出さん、ぜひお願いします。
はい、ありがとうございます。すいません、英語喋れないので日本語で質問させてもらいます。人口減少等々で農作物を作りすぎている国もあれば、飢餓で苦しんでいる国もあるっていうところで、世界中で矛盾が起きているなっていうところが、ディスカッションを通して、強く感じることができました。ありがとうございます。その中で、ちょっと世界的な、話といいますか、国連的な話の中で、ちょっと私の質問が、日本の国ではっていうところで小さくなってしまうんですけど、日本ではその輸出が、島国っていう観点からもですね、輸送の観点で輸出が、難しい、生鮮食品に関しては難しいと。また国内の消費も減っていく中で、今まで通りの、農地面積での生産であったりですとか、その面積あたりの生産性の向上っていうところを目指していく。そういったところではなくですね、そもそも農作物の変更であったりですとか、 その今まで活用していた農地の、他への転用であったりですとか、そういったものも必要なのではないかなというのを思っていまして、一方で今のアグリテックないしは農業系のスタートアップってなりますと、面積あたりの生産性効率化、収量増加っていうところが非常に多くですね、今まで通りの農地面積での生産でいいのか、面積あたりの生産性向上でいいのか、それを他の作物への変更であったりですとか、他への転用なども必要なのではないかというふうに私は思っているんですが、ここについての、もしご意見あったりですとか、あとは他の国での好事例などございましたら教えていただきたいなと思い質問させていただきました。よろしくお願いします。
ありがとうございます。So his question, first, his, comment is that, he can, through today's discussion, he can clearly understand that, on one side of the world, there are countries that is overproducing, the foods, while on the other side of the world, there are, many countries that are, suffering from the hunger. So, there should be, a lot of spaces, for the kind of, balancing or, optimization of the food production. And he appreciates in the discussion today. And in terms of, the optimization or, the production increase, the traditional approach, especially like in Japan, was about how to increase, the number of planted area as well as, how to increase the production per acre. However, from the dramatic innovation point of view, should there also be some option to also change the type of the plant or production to different type of crops or food production than the current ones? And in that case, there a lot of policies or technologies regarding the conversion of the existing planting production should also be discussed. So he also would like to understand or listen to your advice about those issues. By the way, he's from food tech ag tech startup in Japan.
Very good. I think I'll take this one on, and it's a great question, and you make really important points about the disparities that do indeed exist, especially north to south. If you really think about sort of the dividing line here globally, in terms of where there's excess and then where there's challenges in having enough food and really the hot spots of hunger, for example. But you're exactly right. I mean, at some point, it's not so much about shifts in trade or transfer of food products. It's really about ensuring, especially we'll say on a continent like Africa, that its own productivity of crops and food production are increased and are enabled. And as we really do sort of look at those places, you see a few problems that need to be addressed. And one is, you're exactly right. And oftentimes we find not necessarily the best suited crops or the most even high valued crops being produced in a particular country. So a reliance on very traditional staple crops, grains and other basic commodities oftentimes is the case of what you'll see, as opposed to something more suited for either the natural climate or something of a higher value that can generate more income. The other problem that we have is policy, national policies and national subsidies. I can again attest to that in the United States. Our historical policy decisions that have been made have really influenced producer decisions and cropping patterns and cropping systems across the country that aren't necessarily market driven, aren't always focused on best suitability for productivity measures, but really are, again, maybe oftentimes political or even sometimes income based. And the last point I would just make is, I think we are also going to have to acknowledge that entirely new breeds and new varieties of crops and plants and products are indeed going to come. And whether that comes through, and are needed, whether that comes through biotechnologies, advanced tools in gene editing, but these next generation varieties that are going to allow for nitrogen uptake, for drought resistance, for better suitability in critical areas is going to be another component of this.
Thank you very much. まずご指摘が大変的確なご指摘で、食料のその過剰と不足の偏在というのはその南北問題としても知られていて、これは単に貿易をシフトすればいいとか、片方の生産性を調整すればいいというのだけで済む話ではありませんと。で、特に例えばアフリカなどでも、そのアフリカ自身のその食料の生産性というのを上げていかなければならなくて、で、そのやっぱりボトルネックになっているところというのは、その土地に必ずしも最適な作物が植わっていない、その気候に対して必ずしも最適な作物になっていないであるとか、あともう一つは価値が十分に高くない作物を植えていて、そのために収入が経済が十分に回っていないということもありますと。なので、この作物転換ということを議論するということは非常に重要な、必要なタイミングに来ているというふうに、ベスさんも考えています。で、そこに対して必要なアプローチというのはやっぱり政策的な部分で、例えば農業生産政策が市場ドリブンになっていなくて、非常に政治的な事情で決まっていたり、あるいはその特定の収益利益団体ですねの事情で決まっていたりということもありますし、そういったところに対するアプローチというのがまず必要になりますと。それから今度政策的なところではなくて民間セクターでいうと、やはりその技術的なところで新しい作物を作っていくためにこれまでは例えばバイオテクノロジーであったり遺伝子改変であったりっていうところが主なフォーカス焦点になってきていたんですけれども、そこをもうちょっとさらに技術が進んできて、例えば特定の栄養素ですねに対する吸収性の高い作物であるとか、あるいは害虫、特定の害虫に対して強い作物であったり、あるいはそれを成し遂げるような様々な物質であったりだとか、そういったものの開発、そしてその展開ということがそういった分野をさらに後押ししていけることになるので、そういった部分でもぜひ民間セクターの民間部門の連携というのをしていかなければならないというふうに考えていますというそういう回答です。
ありがとうございます。
ありがとうございます。では、まだまだちょっとお聞きしていきたいんですけども、お時間もですね、過ぎてしまったので、春日さん、このあたりでもよろしいでしょうかね。
はい、ありがとうございます。
改めまして、今回はビクトリアさん、ベスさん、ありがとうございました。皆さん、ぜひ心の中で大きな拍手をお願いいたします。
Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Victoria, for the great discussion today. There are, too many questions still coming, but since the time is limited, so we would like to, wrap up the session here.
Well, I'd like to thank IT Farm, you, Shinya, and your team for hosting this wonderful discussion. And I have to say thank you, Beth. It's always a pleasure sharing the stage with you and hear your wonderful insights. I always learn something new from you.
IT ファームの皆様、スタッフの皆様、今日こういった機会をご用意いただいて、ありがとうございます。それから、ベスさん、今日こういった場に来ていただいて非常に光栄です。こうやってディスカッションできる機会というのを非常に楽しむことができました。ありがとうございます。
I would just echo Victoria's words, Shinya, and to you and the colleagues at IT Farm. Thank you so much for putting this together. And Victoria, I think we're on the path to doing more of these together. I hope so, at least. The partnership between XTC and FAO is an incredibly important one, and I think it really is setting a really important tone, given the interest and the feedback and the questions that were received today on so many of the important and powerful things we can do when we work on these big food and agriculture issues together. So thanks everybody for being with us this morning.
IT ファームの皆様、春日さん、スタッフの皆様、本日はどうもありがとうございました。今日このような大事なお話を議論する機会をいただいて、さらに会場から非常にたくさんの反応をいただいて、大変ありがたく嬉しく感じております。で、この農業、食料といったこの非常に重要な問題をこのXTC の皆様と一緒に ディスカッションできる機会があったことを大変嬉しく思います。改めて本日はどうもありがとうございました。
And to all the entrepreneurs watching, apply to Xtc Japan. For more information, head to the website Shinya is directing you to.
起業家の皆様、ぜひXtc Japan 日本予選にご応募ください。Xtc Japan の日本予選の応募の情報は、ウェブサイトの上で検索エンジンで Xtc Japan 2022と検索していただくか、あるいは、この YouTube の概要欄の方から、Xtc の公式サイトの方に、リンクが貼ってありますので、そちらの方から応募のページの方に移っていただけます。はい。
はい、そうですね。ぜひぜひ、YouTube の方からチェックしてホームページ見ていただければと思います。また、今回のイベントの感想などもありましたら、ハッシュタグ XTC Japan でツイートしていただけたら嬉しく思います。XTC の日本予選 XTC Japan 2022は2022年3月9日に開催予定ですので、ぜひぜひお楽しみになっていただければと思います。では、改めまして、本日はベスさん、ビクトリアさん、そして春日さん、ありがとうございました。
本日はどうもありがとうございました。Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Victoria.
それではこちらでイベント終了にします。ありがとうございました。
Have a great day. Bye bye. ありがとうございます。